Welcome to the CFB Dynasty Podcast with hosts Matt Knowles and Brian McElfish.
Hey everybody out there, this is the CFBDynasty.com podcast. Matt Knowles here alongside founder and creator Brian McElfish, as well as Doug Gravely. Today we have a great show for you. We're going to be talking about the next man up at running backs. We're going to be talking about the top 10 schools where you need to be paying attention to the battle to replace some heavy hitters in college fantasy football in 2022. B-Mac, Doug, how you doing today? I know you guys are excited about this podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm stoked. Like it's feeling like football again. So, next week I'll be taking the family over to the Swamp for the Gators spring game. They do a Thursday night deal, whatever, that opens up Saturday for me to watch a bunch of spring games. So the draft is this month, and we're 141 days out at this moment. I'm pretty excited, man.
So, Doug, last week we were joined by Hangry Doug. You were a little bit ornery, a little bit frustrated because you had not eaten a pretzel. You talked about before the podcast you wanted to eat that pretzel, and today you said we're going to be joined by Hyper Doug. Why was it Hangry Doug last week, and why is it Hyper Doug this week? What's got you all hyper today, man?
I don't know, man. A couple things got me hyper. I'm feeling this episode. I think it's going to be really good. And dude, the Masters started today. I'm a huge golf freak, so I'm just excited. Seeing the PGA and the Live players join together again should be really good. You get to actually watch, the best of the best play each other again, and I always like that stuff. But man, I'm just excited. It's a good day.
Football is coming.
Well, now that all of our listeners have fallen asleep because you talked about golf.
Also, I got to buy the Phil Steele magazine March 31st. So
really,
obviously, I don't get it for quite a while, but I was able to buy it, and that's a little bit of football. So I was stoked.
Yeah, I was like, Phil Steele put out a magazine on March 31st. I'm like, that seems very, very early. Okay, nope. So good. So you just pre-ordered the thing. All right. So all right, so we got a great episode today. We're going to be talking about the top 10 situations you got to keep your eye on. This does not mean that the guys that are going to be the next man up are going to be the top 10 running backs preseason. This is situations where you had a running back that was impactful last year in college fantasy football, that there is a question about who's going to be the guy that's going to be replacing them. Guys, you need to keep your eye on, because this could be the difference between whether or not you come in first, win your championship, or you're Doug and don't. And all right, so you guys just want to jump right into it, or do you want to make sure that we let everybody know that they need to like and subscribe on all the socials? Make sure you're on Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you get up onto discord.com and follow cfbdynasty.com, because the one thing we want to do is make sure that this is not a one-way podcast. And what we mean by that is we like being able to get on this podcast and give you information out, but we want this to be a two-way podcast. We want you guys to be able to go to the Discord and comment back. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know if there's a running back situation that we didn't talk about today that you guys really think we need to keep our eyes on, that you think the community at large needs to keep their eye on. We want you to comment back that we want this to be interactive. We don't just want this to be information out. We want your information as well. That being said, BMAC, let everybody know why you decided to do these articles. Last week we did quarterbacks. Next week's going to be wide receivers. What was your motivation to do this?
Yeah, and let me echo the sentiment on the two-way communication here. So that's one thing that I've been bad at, honestly. Focused on the rankings, focused on creating the content, but not as much on building the community. And man, that's what we want. That's all we want to do, is build the community, college football fanatics, so that we can have fun. Hopefully win some money while we're at it, and talk football. So we'll stick to that for sure. So this, like you said, a little bit in the intro, we're looking at some of the top running backs that in their production last year, and going over next man up. Now, one thing to be said, like, this isn't just the top 10. Like, obviously, Tyjae Spears leaving Tulane, not necessarily a next man up situation. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but not everything is a next man up situation, where you see like Lou Nichols from a couple years ago, and we've talked about him, where their O-line was decimated by the NFL draft at Central Michigan. He was the leading rusher that year in college football. And then coming back his next year, it sucked. And anybody who drafted him high certainly was disappointed by his output. So you can't just rely on next man up just based on stats alone. So that's why we're going to go into some of the situation scenarios, what we're hearing, and get to it for 10 of these schools that are losing a top player.
Well, why don't we just get right into it? I see the first school you guys you want to talk about is Texas. Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson both are going to be out. I definitely have some comments, some thoughts about this situation, but I can't wait to hear what your guys' thoughts are.
All right. So like you said, Matt, Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, both leaving Texas. From the top of my mind, that's over 2,000 yards of production on the ground and 20 some odd touchdowns. So that's a lot of production to make up for. Potentially you're looking at a 4-person battle here. I know in my mind, the top 2 that stick out to me are Jonathan Brooks and Cedric Baxter. But you've got Jaden Blue and Keelan Robinson who are also there. The only thing that worries me really about Keelan Robinson is he had some chances in the Alamo Bowl and was only able to produce 27 yards. So the first kind of highlight we got from him was very minimal. And then Jaden Blue, another one who, super fast guy, really highly recruited, but only managed 15 carries last year. So we don't really know what to expect from him either. And then you've got Cedric Baxter, obviously, sensational year as a senior in high school, top-ranked running back coming into, this year as a prospect. And people don't speak enough about him, I don't think. But Jonathan Brooks, when given his opportunities, showed some greatness. So I think it's between Brooks and Baxter, in my opinion, but there's a four-headed monster here that could be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think one of the.
Go ahead. Sorry,
take it. You take it, B-Mac.
Keelan Robinson, he was really talented, great pass catcher, transfer from Alabama from a couple years ago. Just hasn't really put it all together on the field yet. Could he do it this year? He totally could. And he's the senior guy. So if you think about Texas, where are they right now? They've got elite receivers, an incredible tight end, one of their best offensive lines they've had in a long time. Of all the things that matter, pass protection matters a lot. So you lean potentially towards the veteran, or, Jonathan Brooks got more carries and touches than Jaden Blue, but not a ton more. Because Bijan and Roschon, took most of it. So Keelan could be that guy. He could be the safety net where he's great out of the backfield, great pass protection if it ends up that way. But I think by the end of the year, Cedric Baxter and talent will win out there. And although they're all, good, talented players, I could see that would be the most likely scenario that I see playing out.
So going into 2022, I had Roschon Johnson. I was like, man, he had a great 2021. It looked like he was en route to a great potential year in 2022. He's actually, projected to get drafted in the NFL because of his talent. But Bijan Robinson completely became the man. There was no running back by committee at Texas last year. Roschon did absolutely nothing from a fantasy perspective. Do you guys feel like that with Bijan leaving, there's going to be, you said, more running back by committee? Or do you think that there's going to be a guy that's going to become like Bijan and going to be getting the lion's share of carries at Texas and the rest are going to fall off?
So if you look at Sarkisian's history, it's going to be a guy that takes over. And that's just how I think it'll play out. And it could be any of the 4, but I think by mid-year, I think you'll see it be Baxter unless Robinson comes in or Brooks comes in and kind of takes off.
I'm very interested to see.
Like I was saying, in my opinion, I think Brooks is going to win the job at first, and then I agree with BMAC. I think, the Baxter push is going to be pretty great, and I think, by mid-year, Baxter, we might see a lot of him.
Yeah, if you're drafting today, it's Baxter to me.
Well, I'm very interested to see the school we have at number 2. My guy from last year, a guy I talked about a lot on the podcast, Pitt losing Israel Abanikanda, a guy that took the college fantasy world by storm last year, but took it by storm in a bizarrely inconsistent way. He didn't come on until partway into the season, but when he hit huge. When he had big games, if you knew the right week to play him, you probably were going to win, but that didn't mean he was going to be able to play and get you points every week. When we did the top years all time for running backs, Abanikanda actually showed up on that, I think the top 100 list, which was pretty incredible for a guy that didn't play and didn't even start for the whole year. Regardless, he's a huge piece of the Pitt offense that's not going to be there now. Let's talk about the guys that have the potential to be the next man up at Pitt. Why don't you start, BMAC? Let's talk about these guys in the Pitt backfield.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. It's Rodney Hammond. You know, he competed with Abanikanda for that starting job, had a couple touchdowns early on in a early game, and then he was hurt for most of the rest of the year. So, you know, Derek Davis is there. Sibo Flemister is there. But yeah, I just think Hammond's going to be the guy. And in a run-heavy or run-first offense, I like Hammond a lot in fantasy this year.
Yeah,
what
I
about
agree.
you, Doug? What are your thoughts?
I like Hammond. I think it's Hammond's job. I don't see Sibo or Derek really giving him very much of a competition.
Agreed. All right, we'll move on. We're going to move on to the next school on the list. Oklahoma. Eric Gray is out. We have a 3-headed battle. Next man up. Doug, why don't you take that one to start? Let's talk about the guys that are going to be replacing Eric Gray at Oklahoma.
So, first, you've got Javante Barnes, who I think is expected to lead the backfield this year for them. He was Gray's primary backup last year, and Barnes averaged over 5 yards a carry. When he played, he showed greatness. Again, it's kind of, to me, it's a little similar to Pittsburgh. I think it's Barnes' job to lose. I like Sawchuk, but I don't know. I think with how Barnes performed, I think it's his job to lose. I mean, and they've got Marcus Major too, but I think the battle would mostly be between Barnes and Sawchuk, and I think it's Barnes' job.
Yeah, Major just hasn't been able to be healthy any season. So yeah, we'll see, and I agree. I think Javante Barnes, you know, where do you slot him is interesting in terms of fantasy rankings. Oklahoma, you know, they've got the you know, Dylan Gabriel, who's a statue back there. Like, this is a prime running back scenario where you can see a true breakout here. And I think Javante Barnes is primed to be that guy. I think, you know, would you draft him as a top 15 running back? I think by the end of the year, I think you totally could. And I think he'll be a every week starter, no matter who they play. And with Barnes, you know, taking the lead there. Sawchuk's not going to really take away from the goal line. He's a smaller, shiftier running back. Like, I think Barnes is the total package. He can catch, he can block, he's got the most experience, and he's only a sophomore. Like, I think he's going to have a great year.
Next up, we have a school that is BMAC's favorite topic, college free agency. I mean, the college portal. Where you have a school that has got some guys coming in from the portal that made their name elsewhere. It's going to be interesting. We're talking about UCLA, Zach Charbonnet out. Let's talk about the next 3 guys that could potentially be the one taking over. I think this one, to me, seems like probably one of the easiest calls as far as who's going to be the next man up, but it doesn't mean that it's not an interesting situation. All right, so take it away, guys. Let's talk about UCLA and their next man up situation.
Carson Steele, end of story. But he had 1,700 yards, 15 touchdowns for Ball State last year, and so they've got Anthony Atkins. He came over from Army. Keegan Jones is a returning, like the leading returning UCLA running back, but still, he caught 21 balls, which is good. You know, you want those kind of running backs, and ran 73 times for 320 yards, 4 touchdowns. But yeah, I think Carson Steele is going to take the lead role and be the premier running back that you want from UCLA. Now, I do think they're going to work in other people. They're going to work Keegan Jones into the passing game. Atkins will get some of his touches. I don't know that you would. I don't think Steele is going to exceed what he did last year. Now that opinion would change if if Schlee just takes off and wins the job and does a little less running. But I think Steele's going to be the guy, and I'd project him to be maybe probably within 10% of his production to last year.
So Doug, as a follow-up question to that for you, Doug. So if you are an owner that had Carson Steele last year at Ball State, put up crazy video game numbers, should they be worried about Carson Steele going into a Power 5 situation where you're going to have much better competition, or do you think that he's still going to be able to produce at a top level, even though his competition week in and week out is going to be greater?
I think he's still going to be able to produce at a high level. So you've got a guy like Atkins, like Brian was talking about, who's known for being a power guy, but Carson Steele's no scrub either. I mean, you've seen videos of him running people over, and but again, I agree with Brian. I don't think 1,700 yards is going to happen, but I could very well likely see him getting 15. I mean, 14 to 15. I don't see him as a guy you'd want to take out of your roster, if I can just put it that way.
So you heard it there first, guys. If you own Carson Steele, Doug has just said, Hyper Doug has said, I could see 1,400, 1,500 yards at him. If you don't get that, you better be down at the Searchalytics office.
And I'll get you a coffee. That's our thing. If you don't get it, I'll get you a coffee, guys. No
so is that going to be your brisket lock? Your preseason brisket lock is going to be Carson Steele, 1,400, 1,500 yards.
I'll let you know. I think my brisket lock is somebody I'm going to talk about next week. So
yeah, and our predictions show Matt is scheduled for like August.
All right. So with that being said, we're jumping to the Midwest. Going to go to Illinois. Chase Brown, not there anymore. This is the first time we're looking at a two-headed battle, we think. Let's take it away. Let's talk about the guys looking to be the next man up to replace Chase Brown at Illinois.
Man, this one gets to me a little bit, because if you read all the Illinois writers, you read what the coaches are saying. They're expecting running back by committee here. And I think that, so they've got some good, massive, like 240, 230 pound freshmen coming in at running back. But I think McCray, who's got a big enough size where he's not going to lose goal line touches. He's 6'1", 235. He's going to be the lead running back. So if you're targeting a running back in fantasy, it's Josh McCray. And then if you think about what if McCray goes down again, because he was hurt a lot last year, Reggie Love could be that guy, like a total premier handcuff if your league's big enough, or someone that you would want to watch and pick up as a waiver wire selection, elite waiver wire selection if Josh McCray goes down. But they want the by committee approach at Illinois. At least that's what they say. That being said, Illinois, or Brett Bielema, has always had a running back centric system. So maybe a by committee, you're still probably getting 17, 18 carries minimum for a lead back in a elite, potentially rushing offense.
Yeah, you look at those Bielema offenses at Wisconsin. If you had the number 2 running back, you still had a guy that was going to be an RB2 starter, even though he was the quote unquote backup at Wisconsin. That's a very good point.
Yeah, so I like McCray a lot, probably more than most, and hoping to land him in different leagues that I'm in. So I'm certainly excited about McCray. But see what happens.
Note to self in the home league: draft early, make BMAC mad. Guys. Make BMAC mad.
Yeah, my list is long enough.
It's one of the things we like to do in our draft is try to make BMAC mad.
Yeah, I mean, when our rankings are going 300, 400 running backs deep, we'll be prepared.
Yeah,
by we I mean good. Me. But, yeah.
All right, we're gonna jump over to Utah and Tavion Thomas. Tavion Thomas was a guy that was drafted super high last year in a lot of leagues. I don't think Tavion Thomas really performed the way that he should have for being such a super high draft pick that was out there. Do you think any of these guys fighting for his position have a chance to redeem that high draft position that he had last year?
So with Tavion Thomas and all his injuries / off the field issues and getting in his own way, acting like a child, really. They didn't really struggle at running back, in my opinion. I felt like whoever started, in that position, that specific game, did fine. Whether it was Micah Bernard or I'm just gonna say Jay Jackson, because
Jaquindon.
Jaquindon, who was a quarterback that that made the transition to running back. Both of them looked good. So Jackson, who ran the ball less, only had 2 yards less than Bernard. So my favorite for this position is Jackson, but I could see this one very well being maybe not as big as Illinois, but a committee type style with those 2 running backs.
Man, I will say, so I was at the Florida-Utah game to open the season last year. Micah Bernard is so good. He's really shifty. And yards per carry is great. I like him a lot. He's been around the program for a long time now. I think he entered the program when he was 17, and now 4 years later, he could be the lead guy. But yeah, Jaquindon Jackson will probably take over. Bernard entered the portal, came back. You're looking at a potential by committee approach here at Utah between those 2. And then if you're lucky, Jaquindon with his, former, he came over, transition from quarterback to running back, if maybe there's some trick plays in the books for him to throw a couple. So I like both of those 2 a lot. Utah runs the ball enough, but then you've also got Cam Rising coming back, and he runs the ball a lot. So it might just be a mess to avoid at Utah, which, historically they've been a staple potentially at running back fantasy.
All right, next up, we got the powerhouse, Georgia. Seems like Georgia is putting guys into the NFL every single year. They've become more and more of a factory in the last 5 to 10 years. Kenny McIntosh is going to be out. So let's take a look at the 3-headed monster you guys believe are going to be competing to be that next man up at Georgia.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the quarterback show last week, but Stetson Bennett also, his void presents an opportunity for these running backs at Georgia, because he ran 10 touchdowns last year. And if they've got, potentially, if it's not Gunnar Stockton, they've got like less of a running guy at the quarterback position. So I think more on the table for the running backs, and you got to like that. But right now, Kendall Milton hurt, out for the rest of spring. Hamstring, which sucks to hear, because those can linger. At least it's not close to the season. But same for Dijon Edwards. So Branson Robinson's getting his run with the ones, and he's getting a lot of carries, and has been doing really well as far as there's always just positivity abounds, right? In the spring, everyone's doing great, but Branson Robinson's certainly getting his touches with the ones, and I like Kendall Milton. I don't know that he has he's not the elite player that we've come to expect from Georgia with DeAndre Swift and Chubb and Sony Michel and Todd Gurley, but I think he's the most likely to end up putting up better numbers than we've seen in fantasy the last couple of years out of the Georgia position of running back. But I'd watch out for Branson Robinson. Last year, freshman, a huge player with I just think him and Milton in the red zone will potentially be the guy. But Dijon Edwards is no slouch either. They spread it out. He had 769 yards and 7 touchdowns kind of quietly last year.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what do we think about the situation at Alabama? Last year, Jahmyr Gibbs transfers over from Georgia Tech, becomes the guy at Alabama. Started off the season, did not put up the kind of numbers that we all hoped for as in college fantasy football, but by the end of the season, he was exactly what we expected. Mm-hmm. Now you got a bunch of guys that are looking to take over that spot. Do you think we're going to be back to the running back room of old? I know we talked about this in some of the other shows, that you feel like we're going to go back to having more production out of the running back room at Alabama, Which one of these guys do you think has the best chance of becoming that big time stud at Alabama?
So I'll chat briefly about it a little bit, and then I'll let BMAC take over because he's been doing his due diligence on this Alabama, how they're probably going to play. But I think McClellan's going to be the guy. I think it's his job really to lose. He's been super patient. Served as the backup to, it seems like he's been the backup to 15 different running backs there, but it's
3 NFL guys, right?
Yeah. So, but
Najee,
I think McClellan's
Brian
be the
Robinson,
guy.
and now
Gibbs.
Jameer.
Yeah. So when he does play, I mean, you've seen moments of greatness from him. And then you've got Williams and Miller. I don't know. I expect Justice Haynes, honestly, to potentially be McClellan's backup, even though I know they usually kind of go with the older guys at Alabama. But I think Haynes is kind of too good of a guy to pass up on. But I expect McClellan to be the guy. And like I said, I'll let BMAC take it from here because he's done a lot of due diligence on this Alabama team. So.
Yeah. McClellan's got it all, right? He's got great hands, great out of the backfield, good blocker. He's got home run speed. You see him already with 80-yard touchdown runs, and he's good in the red zone. Rarely fumbles. Roydell Williams, though, he's gonna stay as the backup. I feel like he's the hammer. Basically, he'll come in and steal some touchdowns from McClellan in the red zone, and will be a solid backup. And then Jam Miller and Haynes will kind of battle it up for who's going to look like they want to position themselves as the future of Alabama. And then Richard Young comes in the fall, I believe. I don't think he's in for the spring. So as always, talent abounds there at Alabama. And the O-line, though, that's where you want to look at. They're beefing up along the line. They're going to be as far as height and weight, as big as they've been in years. And I think they're going to be potentially more ground and pound than they have been. And McClellan could totally bust out. Potentially elite Devy prospect too, with all of his skills that he presents. Love McClellan's potential this year in that Alabama rushing attack.
Alabama's always a fascinating school from a fantasy football perspective because you expect every year somebody's just going to blow up, whether it's a running back or at wide receiver, obviously quarterback. But there's always those guys that you think are going to be the shoe-in to be your big stat producer that just do nothing. So Alabama, they're totally feast or famine when it comes to fantasy football. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens in that backfield. Are you going to be the guy that can look into your crystal ball and find that right guy and be the guy that is able to get the blue chipper and not the dud out of that backfield from a fantasy perspective?
Yep, right.
All right, next up, Texas A&M, Devin Achane. He's gone. Who do we like in the Texas A&M backfield?
Go ahead, BMAC.
Yeah, so I think this is analogous or similar to Texas here. This is a big season for Jimbo, right? You can't afford to have another season like you did last year. And then they're bringing in Petrino to maybe call the plays. So this is where pass protection is going to be so important. You've got Amari Daniels back, a total of 36 carries last year. Le'Veon Moss, a total of 27 carries last year. Not a lot of production at the running back position. And then you add in the talented 5-star Reuben Owens. And I think by the end of the year, it's going to be Owens. Like, I think similar to Texas, how it's going to kind of play out where, maybe Daniels or Moss gets the start early on, but over time, as Owens becomes better in pass pro, I think he'll end up, the talent will win out and he'll be the guy. Maybe not a third down running back, which is, obviously pass protection heavy or super important. So I don't know. It's going to be weird to watch. I've kind of sold shares of Texas A&M just because, if it blows up and goes wrong or goes poorly in the first few weeks of the year, it could blow up bad with Jimbo there. Right. And don't want any part of that. But it could also play out really well where Wegman comes on, shows what he was, kind of continues what he was producing at the end of last year. Evan Stewart, elite potential NFL style wide receiver, and then Ruben Owens at running back. So you could see a path where it opens up for Owens if A&M's having a good season to kind of take over by the end of the year.
Yeah, that team potentially could be led on offense by 3 really young guys. So you kind of don't know what to expect, but B-Mac, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that you expect Owens to kind of take the job. I mean, just based on talent, I think he's better than the other two for sure. And then with Evan Stewart and Wayman in that offense, like it could just be a young, fun offense to watch as long as somebody I'm not a fan of in the name of Jimbo, lets these kids actually play football. And, I don't know. I just not a fan of him too much, so we'll see.
All right. Last but not least, in our top 10 running back situations to keep your eye on, we're going to go to Kansas State and Deuce Vaughn. Who do we like in the Kansas State backfield to replace Deuce Vaughn as the next man up?
So this one's intriguing to me. I liked watching Ward run. He's one of those guys that seems to always average more than 6 yards a touch. Like he's shifty. He's quick. He's, a lot of things you want to see in a running back, but you got DJ Giddens, who is no slouch at all. Voted by the coaches as offensive freshman of the year in the Big 12. A lot of people probably expect Ward to come in and win that job, but man, after stuff that I've been reading about both of them, and watching both of them and some film on both of them, man, that's going to be tough. This could be a really, really fun battle to watch because both of them are so good. Could it be a committee thing? Maybe. Or maybe one of them just pushes the other one so much where their talents really come out and they could be one of the next big guys in college football. You just never know.
Yeah, this is one of those situations to me where next man up may not apply. Like Deuce Vaughn has been a staple of that offense for a while. And then we'll see now in the post-Deuce Vaughn era what that coaching staff's going to do with these two running backs. Because, yeah, they're both really talented. I agree. Trayshawn Ward, he's quick, not fast. But, inside the numbers there, like he's so good and he runs really strong, runs angry. That one less likely to invest in from a fantasy standpoint. If it was just one of those guys there, changes everything, right? Mm-hmm. But having both of them there, I think they'll both get their share of touches.
Yep.
All right, so that is our top 10 situations you guys need to keep your eyes on, but don't let that fool you. There are way more situations you need to be keeping your eyes on. That's why there's going to be preseason rankings. That's why BMAC and Doug are working on the rankings for 2023, because there's a lot more going on in college fantasy football than just these backfields. If you had a draft and you're like, okay, we're going to draft every one of these guys, you're talking about 2 or 3 rounds are all gone. You know that your draft is not going to be made by the top 2 or 3 rounds. You got to have some depth. You got to make sure you're uncovering guys like Israel Abanikanda that was nobody in the college fantasy scene before week 2 or 3 last year, and then he blew up. There's going to be guys that are not going to be talked about. There's going to be guys that may be lower in the rankings, but you need to be doing your work as well. That's why you need to like and subscribe to CFBDynasty.com. You want to go up there and be able to get your hands on the rankings. You want to, when you get into the season, you want to be able to have your starts and sits. You want to be able to get that inside information so that way you can have the leg up. You can have the edge on your fellow owners in your league.
Can we get a bonus question in here, Doug? So
sure.
All right, if you were drafting today in a Devy league now, who would you want out of the USC backfield? Austin Jones, Marshawn Lloyd, Raleek Brown.
You're killing me, bro, because I have Marshawn Lloyd already.
Mm-hmm.
And when he went to USC, I was a little upset, I'm not going to lie, because Jones played really well. And Raleek Brown, somebody who BMAC and I are both honestly pretty high on. If I had to pick, probably go Raleek.
Yeah.
Probably go Raleek. I mean, super talented running back, and I don't know, man. I think Marshawn Lloyd and Jones are kind of going to handicap each other a little bit. So
yeah, I somewhat agree with that analysis, although I think Marshawn Lloyd is going to be a really good pro prospect still.
Well, I agree with you on the pro prospect, but I'm thinking overall, I would probably go Raleek.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
What about you, Mac? What would you do?
That's a really tough one. I think Marshawn Lloyd has good NFL potential. Raleek Brown is interesting. He's smaller, but super fast, and he's gonna get some play. I would, if it was a college fantasy league, I'd want Raleek just because you assume he'll be potentially the guy after Lloyd and Austin Jones leave. If it's a Devy league, man, Marshawn Lloyd, I'd probably go Raleek too, but I like Lloyd a lot. I think he's got good potential to kind of be any of these guys, like a third round pick or whatever. If he shows out, has a really good year, these third round running backs are the ones that, not super high draft capital, but high enough to where they're going to get their opportunity during the rookie contract in the NFL. So I think Lloyd kind of fits that bill. Not an elite player, but someone who will probably get his shot and then see what he does with it.
All right, good stuff. So, Doug, I have a question for you. If you lost all ability to have any streaming service or television service and you could not watch your golf this weekend, what would you be doing otherwise?
What would I be doing this weekend? I would probably try to talk BMAC into playing golf.
Would Hangry Doug be making another appearance because he'd be so frustrated?
Oh, I'd probably eat a lot because I'd probably be bored. So probably not.
And finish the tight ends.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm trying. You just expect too much of me sometimes, Brian. I'm one guy. I am one guy, and we all know how I like to finish second, so it's fine. I like to do things at my own pace, Brian. But no, so I don't know. I really want to get back into fishing, and it's that time of year where fishing is going to get fun. So I might even do that this weekend if I didn't have a streaming service to watch some golf. But that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, I would probably be focused on, hopefully getting a couple articles out, even though it's, Easter and families in town and all that stuff. But we did get the ultimate guide to Devy fantasy football leagues out. So if you're in college fantasy or new or just want to get into Devy, kind of learn what it's about, kind of understand a little bit of the basic strategies. And then we also posted here's what a first round regular league looks like, and then here's what a Devy league looks like in a first round draft. So a little bit of a mock as part of that article, which is a fun one. And then if you missed our quarterbacks next man up, that's there. And we listed everything out. It's a detailed post, and we'll be doing the same, working on the same for running backs once this podcast and the video version gets edited. I'll be working on the running back next man up post.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to the next show we have, which is going to be next man up at wide receiver. If you guys were here for our top seasons all time for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks and running backs were filled with guys that were huge producers in college, in the pros, future NFL Hall of Famers or current NFL Hall of Famers. You got to the wide receiver list, and if you're not somebody that's deep in the weeds in college football, a lot of the guys on the list, you just don't even know their names. So that's why I'm really excited about the next man up at wide receiver, because these could be guys that that your Alabamas and your Texas A&Ms and your Georgias are going to be mentioned in the quarterbacks and running backs. I think you're probably going to see some schools that are going to pop up in the next man up at wide receiver that probably wouldn't be mentioned otherwise. So it's going to be a really interesting show. It's going to be one you guys should really pay attention to, because your league can be made or broken by the wide receiver choices you make.
Yep.
And we very much look forward to seeing what the data provides. And very much thank you guys for coming out today, listening to the CFBDynasty.com podcast on behalf of Brian McElfresh. And listen here, Hyperdog. Don't be laughing at me. What are you laughing at me for, man?
I don't know.
Again, on behalf of Brian McElfresh and Doug Gravely, this is Matt Knowles. We thank you guys for coming out, and we'll see you next week.
Adios.
See you guys.